Good morning. I was expecting rain last night because my yard could certainly use it, and we got some in the afternoon, and nothing at night, nothing this morning. Did it rain at anybody else's house? Yeah. Kind of went right over. Well, we've got information here, and it's going to be a little awkward to use it, but so this morning we are going to briefly talk about mic checks and treatments because some people have mentioned. I think George posted he's got
no rain.
Yeah, no, I can't get it up. It's in an email. I don't know how to put it up. George mentioned he did. Where's George? Got 30 mic, a mic count of 30 in one hand, which is pretty high. So we'll chat about that amongst ourselves a little bit later. We have the summer picnic coming up. And Mark's moving the email around, so now I can't see it.
Hey, how well do you work under pressure?
So the picnic, the summer picnic is going to be I think August 27th, which is a Sunday. We tried to get it on a Saturday, but they were all booked up, so it's going to be on a Sunday from about 9 o'clock in the morning. We'll get there, start heating up the grills and everything, and then we'll eat and be done by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to have a couple speakers. Carla's going to speak this morning. Hi, Carla. And Keith and George are going to give some talks. Keith has to leave early, so I think he's going to go first when we have the talks. Get in, get out, right? At the summer picnic, we're going to have door prizes, of course. And it's from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. So don't get there at 9 unless you want to work on the grill with me. Going to have door prizes, a photo contest. The photo has to be taken this year. If you have anything you want to take a photograph of, and Sharon is going to get some professional photographers from the club to judge the quality of the photographs. We're going to have an auction. We've got some donations from people, not a lot, so the auction shouldn't take very long, and auction some stuff off. Going to have the smoker contest. What I think, where is Howard? There is Howard. I guess he's won in a couple years, so.
No, this is like Sharon.
Okay, so it's going to actually be fair. We're going to have a legitimate contest.
Right.
Prohibited from competing for at least a year. We're going to have food, that we'll cook, and then everybody, if you can bring a side dish, that would be great. We talked about this last month. This is basically an illustrated guide, and I know you can't see it, but it has about 80 plus pictures of various bee diseases, what to look for, like, for example, checking for a positive American foul brood. How do you do? You have to do an inspection. It tells you what it looks like in the comb. Crop brood, everything that the larva looks like chalk inside the cell. So it's a really good pamphlet to have. We bought 50 of them. They're on the website. If you want to order one today and take one home with you, you can. I think they're $11.27 because we had to pay for shipping charge, but we got about $2 off the regular price. If anyone else, if we have time, wants to talk about a topic of their choosing, you're more than welcome to raise your hand and do so. We talked about the club, and we have a lot of members that volunteer and they give talks about bees, and we could always use more members to do that. So if you ever see an invitation on the website, I think, Mark, there's another function at Old Sugartown later.
Yeah, beer garden this month.
Beer garden. So it was. I went the last time. It was great. Carla was there. So I'll just read what I wrote. So a great time was had by all at the historic Sugartown in June, especially those stopping by the CCBA tent for the chance to, quote unquote, find the queen in the observation hive. I really have to admit that talking bees with those stopping by is always very engaging. And there's many people that are quite interested in bees, always wanted to have beehives or they have friends with beehives, and they really enjoy learning more about bees. The adults, and especially the kids, always love trying to find the queen. So Mark had his observation hive, and you know how the queen could hide in certain places. Raffle tickets, see Carla for your raffle ticket. We're giving away a Corvette tonight, so everybody wants to get a ticket. So the kids really enjoy finding the queen. And one of the interesting things I think is pretty obvious that kids are being taught some things about bees in school, you know, because they asked me, you know, or they asked me the question or the statement, do you know that without bees, we wouldn't have any food? You know, I'm like, well, great. Yeah, you're right. You know, about 85% of all the things that we eat are pollinated by not only native bees, but also honeybees. So this is the layout of Old Sugartown. If you've not been there, it's pretty cool. Here was the little tent that we had. It was quite warm, and Mark's there. Carla's in the shade. You can see her there. And the kids love as much as the adults looking for the queen. They did have adult beverages in the form of whiskeys, wines, and beer there, which was convenient. And then this is kind of there was 3 or 4 food trucks that were back there. More showed up a little bit later. So people had drinks, they had food, and they also had a band that was pretty decent. So there was a few hundred people there. It was a great time. And then last week I got a call from, it's the Mighty Writers, what they're called, El Futuro Canet. So it's the future writers. And the kids that attend this are primarily of Hispanic descent. They're learning English as a second language for them. So I had the opportunity to talk bees with 22 kindergartners and first and second graders. I've never had any kids, but they kept me on my toes. It was amazing. When I opened up and showed them the observation hive, it was like every single one of them was in a 5-foot circle around me trying to find the queen. It was very interesting. And with the kids, we made, I purchased some clay seed balls with native plant seeds. So we take off the seed balls, kind of mixed in clay and some soil. You're making a little ball. You poke your finger in it. You take the seeds. You put the seeds in the ball. Then you squish it back together, and I put it in some plastic bags. Kids love getting their hands filthy. It was great. And told them that they could plant it in the fall if they'd like. You plant it this time of the year, they may not take as well. So the kids, the younger kids, I had online from Giant Foods, their bee website. They had black and white photographs of bees. So I printed them out, and little kids love coloring that. It's really fun watching them how they all interpreted what a bee colors they should be. And then I purchased some honey straws. So I gave the kids at the end of right before I left. So if they got all wound up in sugar, I wouldn't have to be there and worry about them running around like crazy. And a few of the kids, the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders, and those kids were like, every time I talked, they were raising their hand, asking questions and making comments about bees, which I found, very engaging. So it was a great experience with the kids. And again, the Mighty Writers are trying to learn how to write in English, and the teachers use a topic like beekeeping. So they were taking notes to have the kids write about what I talked about bees during the presentation. So that was pretty cool. Janet and I were at our apiary across the road, across the woods here, and we were there when they put the foundation in and leveled it, and then we were there when they brought the new shed. When we were there for the guys installing it, we had to move one of the nukes. It was on a stand, so we had to move them 3 feet away. So when the bees were coming back, they were in a big little mini swarm. And this guy, the guy that was working, he's like, I got stung in the foot by a bee, and I had to go to the hospital because my foot swelled up about 3 times the size, and I had to get injections of steroids every couple of days. So I gave him my bee suit because I brought mine, but it was hot, and he's just sweating up a storm. He couldn't wait to get out of it. Thankfully, nobody got stung. The only thing about the shed, we thought, Janet thought that she had ordered the shells in there, and she did not order the shells. So we have to figure out if we want to build our own shells or have the company come out and put them in. But the shed looks very nice. And then at some point, we're going to cut the fence down and make a gate, another gate, so we can enter the shed right there. Treasurer's report, everything's good. If you want to read about it, go ahead. I'm not going to spend any time on that. Treasurer's report, summer picnic, I already mentioned that. The next Queen Catch Saturday will be held on July 15th. We need volunteers, so please sign up on the website. George is running that. Monthly meetings. Chaudhry Manzoor is taking donations of children's bee suits for Boy Scout Troop 284. So if you'd like to make a donation to that or donate a suit, the information's there. There is the club activities from George on the queen drafting. And then the next Queen Catch is on July 24th. Vidya has excellent articles in here. And that Tom talks about, Tom's not here today, but he did write an article about what's going on in the hive. Somebody wants bees on their property. So if you're interested in that, there's a contact there. And then we have a member who has a son. He's doing his Eagle Scout project. And at Bondsville Mill Park, we've got the teaching hives there in that apiary. And Mark put together a booklet and laminated pictures of bee information. So what this scout's going to do is he's going to take 3 nucleus hives and paint them up. And then instead of having the papers, the information be in a booklet, he's having them laminated and he's going to put them on a frame so that people, when they want to learn about the information, they can open the beehive, they can see what it's like, and then pick the frames out and put them back in, and they won't get wet and all the pages won't get torn up and the book won't get all destroyed. So I think he's going to be asking if you'd like to make a donation from that at the next meeting. I'm not sure, but just give you a heads up on that. So without further ado, Keith, if you want to start, because I know you've got to pick up your wife at some point, and we don't want you to be late, because I know how I would get beaten if I was late. Thank you.
I do. As you all know, Sharon, she'll probably relish beating you up, all 100 pounds of her. So she's at the farmer's market at the moment. So I chatted to Russ, I think yesterday, and I said, look, we can deliver a quick talk on making money out of bees and beekeeping and the hive products. So I thought this might be a good opportunity to just go through some of the options that you have. And also some of you might be looking at going from, let's say, 2 hives to 10 hives, or from 10 hives to 60 hives. And what are the options that you have, and how do you make money out of the honeybees? So anyway, I can go back. I had my older brother who started beekeeping with me, came out and visited about 3 weeks ago. And we went through the time period when we started. And he reminded me of certain things when him and I started and our first swarm arrived. And it was November 1973 that we started. So that will be 50 years of beekeeping in November. So it was quite interesting. I always thought it was 1976, but he had the exact date there. Anyway, so let's start off early on in my beekeeping career. I'd already been beekeeping for 8 years. I was working with somebody this is a guy who was actively engaged in normal work, so as a full-time worker, but he did beekeeping part-time. So he had about 10, 15 hives. And what he would do with the hive, with the honey that he produced, is he would just give it away. Now, he was beekeeping with me and we were doing it together, and I would sell my honey. So eventually I would go to him and say, look, you're wasting your $600 a month, in the season when he gets the honey. And it was quite an eye-opener for him to see, I'm just giving this honey away. And he even said that sometimes I give the honey to people and they don't appreciate it. They might not like honey, but he gives it to his neighbors and so on. So one of the things to do is to think commercially or efficiently about your honey. A lot of the mistakes that beekeepers make is they will just give honey away. I do this as well. One of my sites, I hand honey out to the workers that work there. And over the years, I've gleaned that they're not really keen on the honey. So I'm giving them honey, but they don't appreciate it. So, things like, I'll give her, no, I don't feel it. My wife doesn't like the honey. And, this time it's okay. It costs us a lot of effort. And also, if you're giving honey away, it costs you because you're paying for the bottle, you're paying for the labor, you're paying for the label as well. So it is expensive just to hand out honey. Okay, so there are different aspects. So first of all, what area? If you're planning, making money out of your honey, your beekeeping products, things like royal jelly, things like propolis, things like wax. Normally, we associated beekeeping, mainly in the States, is with honey and selling the honey. The honey is the most valuable thing. But your bees as well form an integral part. You might become a seller of bees. You can advertise and say, look, I have beautiful queens and I will sell nucleus hives throughout the season. You don't have to sell honey. You've got to identify a market and you can go into that and then capitalize on royal jelly, propolis, wax, honey, whatever your area is. Now, comb honey is quite popular. You might have chunk honey, which is the comb inside a bottle, and your audience now, or your customers will often determine which direction you go. I prefer to sell glass bottles, but unfortunately, the customers I have prefer plastic. So I use plastic bottles because that's what sells more. Okay, so you're thinking about starting, how much can you make? And it's often how creative you are. My wife has gone into a totally different direction where she does a lot of candles. She does a lot of cosmetics. She has a lot of things like the polish for your boots, all made with natural beeswax and propolis and all the different ingredients. We even harvest royal jelly at times, and we add it in, not that we know that it's better or not better, but also one of the things to do is there was a talk given by Mark Antunes from Montgomery County, and he was talking about the fact of going from a normal beekeeping where you have your 2 hives, your 5 hives, you're just doing it, you're making a little bit of honey, and to go into really making money. And he mentioned the fact that once you get to 60 hives, it becomes economical. And that is the break-even point, is your 60 hives. Once you get 60 hives and the production and the cost of your equipment and everything seems to balance out. Another retired teacher gave a talk exactly on this, and he went through his ideal number. So he'd retired from teaching and he wanted to make money out of beekeeping. And he said 87 for him, 87 hives was the amount for him that he could make the same amount as his teaching job gave him. So they're very interesting little pieces. What everyone thinks is the ideal. How much honey do you need? How much can you actually make from beekeeping? And so on and so forth. So first of all, we talk about products of the hive. If I go to Europe, did you know that 50% of all honey sold, more than 50% of all honey sold in Europe is in fact creamed honey? So this is the honey where you use the dice method. You use a 58 degrees and you slowly mix the honey and you keep it at 58 degrees and you add a seed to it and then you get your creamed honey. Okay. Over 50% of all the Europeans like that honey. Now that's maybe over here in the States, it's 5%. If it is 5%, most people prefer the liquid honey. In the States, you'll find that most people don't like the comb honey. If we go back 100 years, it was virtually comb honey was the only thing that they had. It is now much easier. Who's the world's biggest consumer of honey? Which country in the world consumes the most honey?
Ukraine. Germany.
USA, United States, America consumes the most honey. They purchase the most honey. So there we have it. So you've got the market, you just need to advertise it and get your product out there. What percentage of adulterated honey is in our supermarkets?
90.
No one knows, but they recently did they're doing these really in-depth surveys and analysis of the honey. They did one with, the interesting one is the Indian honey. Now, India produces a huge amount of honey, and they could not find one sample of Indian honey that was not adulterated. The main adulteration technique is rice syrup was added to the honey to bulk it up. Okay, so that's the main thing. So a lot of the honey that you're buying that might be imported is not. Okay, something like China is on the region of 60% adulterated. Argentinian honey was one of the better ones. Of all the samples, 40% was adulterated. So a lot of the foreign honeys, and I think a lot of our customers know that a lot of the bought honey is not in fact honey. If you add high fructose corn syrup, that slows down the crystallization. Another thing with marketing your honey is also, if you heat it to 140 degrees, it kills the enzymes, and it allows you to filter, maximize the filter, to take out all of the pollen and the nutrients inside there, and killing all the enzymes, the invertase, and so on. So this over here will allow a longer shelf life, but obviously decreases the nutritional value of the honey, the health benefits of your honey. Okay, what about things like royal jelly? Okay, is royal jelly a viable option? Royal jelly, which country in the world is a leader in royal jelly production? China. China is the leader. They even have genetically selected for the queens that are more likely to deliver large amounts of royal jelly in the manufacturing of the queens and more adaptable to it. So they have got very good royal jelly production. So, and the reason for that is they've got the market for the royal jelly. The average number of beehives in a Chinese apiary is, or in the, owned by a husband and wife team, and that is 50 hives. So they deal with 50 hives, and they'll farm them intensively, and their main product is royal jelly. If you look at some of the other areas, Eastern European, which country in the world has the bee and honey and bee products as the national symbol? Anyone know?
Romania.
Very close. Near Romania.
Hungary. They're Poland.
Below Poland.
Below Poland. Belarus.
Slovenia.
Slovenia. Okay.
Slovenia. You probably all heard of it. You couldn't think of, I mean, there's Slovakia and Slovenia. They sound very similar. But Slovenia is the country that specializes in linden honey. So linden honey is one of the best. We unfortunately don't get it. But now graduating from an economics point of view. Okay, so now you have 2 hives. Okay. Is it worth your while to go to 10? Can you make money? Is it worthwhile? Now, a lot of you as a beekeeper, you'll be looking at it saying, yeah, I've spent so much money on beekeeping. Do I get anything back? Okay. If we look at our area in Chester County, If we look at our big beekeepers, these are what we call the sideline to commercial beekeepers. We don't have any of the mass commercial beekeepers like Grant Stiles in our Chester County. Grant Stiles is 12,000 hives. He's just over in New Jersey. And there is a defining moment of becoming true commercial. True commercial is when we say there are about 2,000-3,000 hives. Grant Stiles, as I said, is 12,000 hives, but he makes a lot of money, but his recommendation is don't get into it. You've got back problems, you've got to organize teams. It becomes a whole economy of scale with trucks and logistics and pollination, and byproducts are honey. Honey is a byproduct in his operation. To the very biggest in the US, which is 110,000 hives, which is the Adair family. So they have 110,000 hives. They get paid just over $200 a hive for the almond pollination. So making money, even for somebody with 100 hives, it might be economical for you to go to someplace like California and leave your hives there in February or 3 weeks to make $200 a hive. Okay, it could be. And again, the economics of scale are the fact that you need 400 hives on a truck, but you often find people that need an extra 50 hives or 100 hives to take to almonds, and they bring them back. Okay, so as we said, marketing, if you look at marketing, there are different mechanisms to market your products. Okay, the one thing that you can look at is going in for the internet sales. Now, if you look at some people are selling honey for maybe $20 a pound, some are going for $30 a pound because their honey is ultimately special. I think some of you have seen these ones. They sell small little jars of honey from exotic places. Okay, so there's always the marketing side of it where you don't have to sell in bulk. And do you sell online? Do you want to sell in supermarkets? Do you want to sell at stores? And one of the best ways of selling your honey is with a sign outside your door. Okay, so your property, you've got a driveway, you can say honey for sale, you put your jars out there, and on a system, doesn't cost you much. And I know Carol and Bob, I've seen their one, I've seen Laura's one. I think a lot of you are doing that, and it's a way to recoup some of the money. You make money out of it. And as I'm trying to emphasize here, often if we give honey to the neighbors, it's a nice way to sweeten them up so they don't complain as much, but also they might not appreciate it. I know I give honey to my neighbor, and I know that it takes them maybe 6 months to finish a jar. So they're not great honey eaters, but yet some of my other apiary sites, I will give them maybe 50 pounds of honey a year, and I know it's all gone. And when I drop the honey off, periodically throughout the year, I drop it off, I get a really good thank you note and saying things like, I've already finished half a bottle, and that was 2 hours after I dropped it off. So, and they say this particular honey is absolutely wonderful. Okay, another thing that we look at is graduating from your 2 hives, your 10 hives, to increase the scale. Now, the commercial beekeepers will say, in the way that they increase, the Brett Adair with the Adair family bees, the way they increase is they purchase other beekeeping setups. Okay, so this is one of the main areas of increasing. The reason for that is you get the apiary site, you get the lease, you get all the hives, you get all the marketing that has been done with that. So they buy it as a completed business. If you want to increase, one of the best ways of increasing is to buy somebody who is going out of the business. And then you'll inherit the marketing, you'll maybe inherit the farmer's market, and you can go then from your 10 hives to your 30 hives. And the reason for giving this talk is that Jack McMichael and a lot of other folk have been to members of our club that have unfortunately passed away. And we go onto the property because their wife has come and said, please sort the bees out. and please auction off the equipment. And we go onto the site, and you can see everything has collapsed because it's already 6 months or a year after the event has happened. The bees are not worth much. Often the hives are not worth much. They've lost their market. They've lost everything, and everything's deteriorated. The only value is probably some of the woodware that you would have, and maybe some of the equipment that they did have. But they would have had a far higher value if they'd managed to recognize beforehand and managed to sell everything. Okay, just before I get too carried away, any questions? Yep.
Going from just giving away your money, when you start selling it, then business-wise, there's permits, certifications, other things involved.
Yes, okay. We have Suzanne Pyle was our inspector for the honey room inspection. So you needed to be inspected for that. Okay, if you're selling your honey, you exempt from that if you are selling on your own property where you produce the honey. So if you're on a farm and you're selling on that farm, then you exempt. But you've got to check all the details. Suzanne Pyle has now been promoted. Has anyone had a recent hive inspection? I forget the gentleman's name, but I organized him to give a speech maybe 5-6 years ago at the CCBA. He gave a speech. I've forgotten his name directly now, but you need to have your honey room inspected for hygiene. Suzanne Pyle told us that it's very seldom that you fail because honey's not, she was very talkative, and she told a lot of, don't buy anything that's from the Amish. I learned something there. So it's but yeah, you need to have your honey room authenticated. You need to have it all done, and in order to be able to sell. So if you sell someone else, you've got to have that inspection, and it's not difficult. But if you've got a shed in your backyard and you've got dirt on the floor, you're not going to pass. You need hot and cold running water, but there are different grades of it. I went through to the upper grade where I painted my honey room with epoxy paint. I covered the lights. I have no windows, and a lot of other little pieces that I added in just to get mine a little bit higher. On my last inspection, the inspector said if he could use mine as a reference for training other people. So it's probably a good omen. Hot and cold running water and so on. So those are things legally you've got to get those done. Pardon?
Bill Keenan. That's the name that someone gave.
Phil Keeler.
K-E-E-N-E-R.
Phil Keeler. It doesn't ring a bell.
County Health Department, is that just
Yeah. It's the PA. I think it's a PA. But pardon? No? Chester County Health Department. Yeah. Sorry, I've just got their names on my phone, so they call me when they want an inspection. So it's during COVID, we had to take photographs of our rooms, and then we got granted the license. So that's one of the hurdles that you've got to go through. Once you've been through it, and your honey, you want your honey to be hygienic. You don't want to have it where there's botulism imported into the honey, and you're accused of this or that and the next thing. But honey is generally safe compared to something like meat packing or baking, cooking and undercooked eggs and so on. So honey is relatively good. Yeah.
you get insurance for that?
Another issue if you're selling your honey is you need insurance. So if I'm selling to a supermarket or I'm selling to a small shop, you need insurance. Now, it's combined with my apiary insurance. So, and again, about 6 or 7 years ago, we went through and had a person that delivered this. It's Vince Rinchuso. If you want to contact him again, it's worthwhile to have your apiary insured. And in fact, my home insurance turned out to be the same as my apiary insurance. They did it with a home insurance, and that covers me for selling honey. If somebody finds a bit of glass in the honey, and they try to sue you, that's insurance for things like that. So it's worthwhile to have. So they want to, if you're selling your honey as you get bigger, it's good to have that insurance. And remember, we've got our own member, the Vince. Who else is insured? Anyone else insured with Vince from Chusa?
No.
Yeah, and Ed as well. So, but yeah, it's
It's not all insurance.
yeah, it's specialized. A chat to Ed as well, or myself, and we can give you the name, Vince's name. What might be a good thing for a talk is to maybe get him in to talk. He's a beekeeper, so he's Tom McKinney. Oh, Tom McKinney does insurance as well. So
The other thing is they want an insurance policy.
So maybe insurance. That's something there that you need to get as you go. But as you progress and you get more and you're making more, it becomes part of the costs. What I do as well is that I declare everything to the IRS. Everything is delivered and the amounts onto that. Other things that we haven't talked very quickly in the last 2 minutes is the extra money that you make. Okay, you can do things like cutouts, and you can go remove bees from people's houses, from those who aren't that diligent with swarm prevention. You can take those swarms out of somebody's house as well. So those are other options for making money with the beekeeping. So there was a guy in Montgomery County that I know that charged $2,000 for removing 2 colonies from one person's house. I don't like doing it. I hate doing it. I used to do this as a youngster. I used to remove colonies. I get stung, and I think it gets quite dangerous. Yeah. So it's more for a younger person. You sometimes in attics, the heat and so on. But I charge about $500 for a cutout. So, but depends if it's high or low. It might come down or go up according to how dangerous is it and how difficult is it. And you generally don't get much honey from them, and generally the bees are not worth honey because they haven't been treated if they're suffering from their own diseases and peoples and everything else. Okay, just before I end, very quickly, this is the first year or the earliest that I've started treatment ever since I've been here in Chester County for 16 years. So this is the earliest I've treated. Why do I treat so early? Because there's evidence of renal. Okay. I did Formic Pro. I wasn't happy with the Formic Pro results. I'm still seeing Varroa. So I'm using oxalic acid glycerine pads, the slow release glycerine pads. They seem to be a lot more effective. Please treat now. Please treat now. Okay. And that's it. Any questions? Who's coming?
Really hard to comment there. Keith. Can you hear me? Okay. My husband is a beekeeper, and we have like 5 hives. And when we first started, we didn't know about this group, and our hives were a many pit, but we were determined to succeed. And now we got to the point several years ago that our bees survived. We sell bees in our front, honey in our front yard. It is no longer a money pit. It actually pays for itself. So that was a bonus. Last year, Mark put a quart jar of honey in the refrigerator in the garage. And this spring, I finally cleaned out that refrigerator, and I walk in there, it looked like lard. And I said, "What is this? It doesn't smell like lard." And he said, "Oh, that's creamed honey." It creamed itself. So this is our first year selling creamed honey, and we use it as a starter. that stuff that was in the garage, and we still have a little bit of it left to make more cream cutting. And then Mark was making candles, and people buy them. Not as many as we would hope, but they still purchase them because they smell delicious. And then I decided, what can I do? What can I use in my own home and then sell? And I decided that I was going to make waxed food cloths. Now, I'm still not to the point where I can sell them, but I'm really, really close. I've learned that this is how I heat my wax. It's on an induction stove because you can control the heat and I don't have to double boil it. And this is my dedicated pot that I use. And I just, when I'm done, I just turn it off. It gets hard. When I want to make some more and experiment, I just turn it on and it melts it. When you're, and this is, I use beeswax, jojoba oil, and natural pine rosin. That's my recipe. I have the amount, but you can find it on YouTube also. That's where I got mine. I have a dedicated spatula, and so far I've started using a roller, and you don't have to, it melts when you put it on here. When I first started, I would dip the cloth in my melted wax, and it was great, but it was just too much. It was just too much. And so then I decided, oh, I need a heated plate. So I went and bought this very large, skillet. And I cover it with a aluminum foil, and it works. And the second time I used the roller and I used this, and it was great, but it was too thin. The wax was too thin. I had this too hot. So now I actually put it on warm. That's all it needs to do this. And then I use the roller, and this is what I've come up with, and it's tacky. But if you're going to sell it, you want to make sure that it lasts. And one thing when you do sell it, you do not wash this in warm water. It needs to be cool water, because, you know, the heat of your hand actually melts the wax and make it stick to jars. So you can lay that on here, press it down, and then you just use the warmth of your hand. And what's really nice is you're getting away from plastic. And it's very popular right now. People are concerned about, I forget what kind of chemicals it is, but it does seep into your food. So these wraps are really nice. And I'm almost to the point. I've got one more thing to experiment. I'll still use this. I will maybe pour some wax on my cloth. There's a cloth that wasn't. And then I think I might get a tongue depressor and try smoothing it over. If that doesn't work, I'll just stick with what I got. So, and then it's always best, you want to make sure that the side that is sticking to your product has the most wax. So depending on how you're doing it, I like to use, I actually do it twice. I'm trying to get, now this right here, this is a fake sandwich. So you can, like if you eat half an apple, you can wrap your apples or cut up stuff. You can send it in your kids' lunch. You can pack it in your own lunch. But this is a fake sandwich wrapped up. So you can use this instead of those bags, which is very nice. And it still sticks to itself. The thing that I found that when you're working with this, I use this to help lift it, but your fingers get so, that wax and that rosin is just awful. So when I finish this on the edge of my counter, I will let it dry like this. And then a few seconds later, it's dry, you just take it off. And then you can fold it. But I've got 3 different sizes that I'm going to sell as a kit. So one for big things, this size, for bigger bowls, and then
Not the whole.
this size. So, so my fingers would get so nasty, and I don't care how much you wash them and scrub them with a nail brush, it's not coming off. Always use coconut, wash your hands with coconut oil. And don't double dip. Because you don't want stuff growing in here. But you just take a little scoop, it doesn't take much, you just take a little scoop, you rub it all over your hands, get a paper towel or a Kleenex, wipe it off, and then wash it, because you don't want all this stuff in your septic tank either. Oh, if you have a septic tank, or pipes, if you have plumbing, you don't want this in it. So you wipe it off before you wash your hands with soap.
Any questions?
Oh, any questions? Yeah.
I'm just store.
Oh, what's really nice is they will, if it's too thick, then they'll actually stick and rip it off when you go to use it. If it's too thin, you can fold it and they'll never stick that hard to each other. But this is perfect. This is how I will sell mine. I'll fold it over like this. And then I'll have a piece of cardboard to fold it in so it's all natural. And then I will do the other ones and put them on top. But when you saw how I did the sandwich, they'll come apart. If you do this right, they'll come apart, and then you can, it'll still last. People complain I know that people have complained when they bought it. And they said that they weren't good at first, and then they just stopped sticking. And that I want people to buy more from me. So that's why I don't want the wax too thin. I don't want it too thick. Because I want that.
It's gotta be a mama bear, just right.
It's gotta be just right. And they have to understand you cannot wash it in warm water. It's cool. You can use soap, but it's gotta be cool water.
It's when you wash it, you use it to wash it.
Mm-hmm.
Cool water,
Yeah,
let it dry.
Yeah.
Then when you hold it, put it in the drawer.
you can fold it, put it in a drawer, but yeah, I don't know if I'd put it in a drawer because I would be using these all the time. And you don't want lint, what drawer, if you have a dedicated drawer, you don't want lint. If you put it in your dish towel drawer.
Just the drawer with a bag and so on.
Oh, yeah. And see, what's really nice is this is almost perfect. So I just have one more experiment to do, and then we're gonna sell these in our front yard. So our bees are gonna be working. Not as much as yours, Keith. But if you can get your bees to pay for themselves and then be able to buy those jars and buy an extractor or buy whatever you want and not feel the pain. We put all of our honey money into a honey jar. And every cent we make, we have to buy bottles, we use that. We have to buy something on the internet for the bees, I take that money out. So it is nice not having a money pit. Any other questions? Yes. It's cotton, and I always wash it, and then I iron it, and then I cut it, and then I do that zigzag, because it could shred, so I don't want a straight edge. But I use my rotary cutter, and then I'll go and do the edges. I'm sure that there's an easier, faster way, but right now I'm at the beginning of it, so this is what I do. But I use cotton. And you can find cotton on sale at Joann Fabrics. And all of my fabric right now it's a bee theme. So maybe later it won't matter. So, any questions? Okay. Yeah.
And you just making additive, we've found what sells really well is the deepest practice class. To wrap up.
Oh, well, that's clever.
We didn't realize.
But you can't use that for food after, oh, people like it's a great gift idea, yeah. Yeah, and the reason why you add these things is, in the old days, they used straight beeswax, but beeswax by itself will crack. So that's why we add the resin and the jojoba oil. So, and it does keep it pretty supple. So, that's it.
Thank you. Well, the next presenters are actually two, because one man can't do it by himself.
Anybody else want to volunteer to help with this talk? Raise your hand. Not Keith.
Yeah.
No. Anyone but Keith. Laura, you want to help? Why? You got to talk already, you know? So we're trying to get new people up here to talk. So what we're going to talk about today is queens. So I'm going to ask a bunch of questions to the panel. And we're going to get people's opinions, and we're going to try to keep this deep and heavy into the weeds of queen here, because it doesn't really apply to most of us. So the question number one is, should you fall in love with your queens?
Yeah, I guess not.
Yeah.
I do. But I don't feel queen.
Don't kill queens. So sort of fall in love with your queens. Yes. Fall in love with your queens?
No.
No. I fall in love with my queen, you know, and why do I think it's a good idea? Because you'll hear Frank Rukowski from X and B say, don't fall in love with your queens, right? And they're production people that are saying that, right? So if your queen is underperforming, or if your colony's underperforming, that's a huge liability to your production, right? I mean, think about, you know, if that hive if that queen is failing and not laying well, and the population of that hive is not thriving, you know, that's instead of a 90-pound honey hive, you're going to get a 30-pound honey hive. That's $600.
Well, regardless of that, it also applies to the backyard beekeeper. If your hive is all jacked up, you know, you're gonna keep injecting new brood. You're gonna try to nurse this hive back to hive where it could be something as simple as just replacing your queen. You know, they fail after a couple of years. You know, back in the day, a queen lived for 4 to 5 years. That longevity of the queens have decreased, whether it be the pesticides or whatever. I don't know if they've ever concluded why, but the average lifespan of a queen is about 2 years, 2 to 3 years. I clip by mark, so they stay on the property. I know where they are, but generally they either swarm out, they die. They run out of semen, whatever the case may be. Again, if you fall in love with your queen, you're going to continually try to keep that hive alive by pulling resources from a healthy hive. That's personally, I don't think that's worth my time.
But falling in love with your queen means that you go out there and you care for her, and you check on her, and you make sure she's doing well, you know? So there's something to be said for falling in love with your queen. I mean, some people name their queens, right? You know, I don't know. How many people here name queens? Don't be afraid to raise your hand. We have only one person naming queens? I'm shocked. There's a lot of people who name queens. They actually put the name of the queen on the hive. So they go visit Martha's hive and Claire's hive and Ted's hive, maybe.
You don't want to tell your queen you have a dude that's for all folks. You know what? Stick her in there.
Yeah, that's true too. You could have a Jerry hive.
True that.
So, yeah.
Just a comment from Robin Underwood when we had the seminar last year up at State College. The research that she came up with in the state of Pennsylvania is at 18 months, the queen, that's her peak, and every month afterwards, her laying of eggs starts to decline. So about a year and a half is when they're absolutely best. Like talked about, they could go on for years, but how productive are
Did she say 18 months of laying or 18 months of lifespan?
18 months of lifespan?
Because she only lays for about 8 months.
in her lifespan at 18 months old,
Her age.
her age,
That's it.
productivity.
Okay.
Starts to drop.
It's on the downside, the slope.
Sure.
So, if you have queens that are in your hives this year, and then you sort of prevent swarming next spring, then those queens come next fall are gonna be, approaching that 18-month mark. So that's kind of where we're at right now, is that if you did what you're supposed to do and prevent swarming, your queens are now, probably 18 months old or approaching that. And that's a decision you have to make is what you do with that. So the next question, so I guess we have a don't fall in love with your queens. I had my breeder queen, as an aside, my breeder queen that I've been grafting from for 3 years now. I went into the hive this week just because I go in there weekly or almost every week this time of year, because last year they tried to supersede her. So I went in there last year, and in the fall they had a couple of queen cells, and there were still eggs and young larvae in there, but they were queen cells. So I got rid of the queen cells, and I just hoped, I was like, what am I going to find this spring? And surely enough, this spring she was still in there. So I was like, great. And this was her third winter that she overwintered. And I went in there last week, and I find one frame with some queen cells on it. I was like, oh, here they go again. They're thinking it's the time of year. A lot of hives do supersede this time of year. And I said, they're at it again. They're going to supersede her. So I cut down 2 cells. I said, something in my brain said, check some more frames. I don't know what, check some more frames. And I pulled some more frames, and there were a lot more queen cells. And then I took a look at the frames, and there was no eggs or larvae on it. So I'm looking around trying to find the queen, and I don't see the queen. I don't see any eggs. I don't see any young larvae, and I just see queen cells. So I think she died.
I've had a couple 3-year queens. I've had a couple queens that went for 3 years and we're still laying strong. But in the fall, they superseded, they finally, and I thought it was that time anyway, so I let it happen, but they made cells, and next thing I have a beautiful queen who look just like her. I don't understand, I don't have queens that are failing, and I keep trying to make that hive work. If it fails, that's gone.
Good.
I don't do that, but if I find a swarm cells, I'll take the queen, make it a hive out of her, and let them then they won't swarm, but they'll make a new queen. So I have a hive there, and I have a hive over here.
Yeah, so they could have been superseding her. They could have been. But the fact that there were no eggs and young larvae in that hive,
They don't have the cells, so.
they have the cells, so they're fixing the problem. But I think the problem this time is because the queen died. And that they're all emergency cells, and there's a lot of them versus just a few.
I figured they must have gotten rid of that.
Yeah, so for a moment I felt some sadness, believe it or not.
I said, another new beautiful queen.
It was like I went in there, I was like, here's the moment, and I was talking to Ed, I was saying, Ed, I have no records. Ed, I have no idea where her daughters are. Ed, what am I gonna do when she dies? And here we are, she's dead. I have no records, and I have no, sort of knowing who the next who her best daughter is out there. So now I'm in a panic. So I'm in a panic. So anyway, that's the story of the current breeder queen. She's no longer. So all of you who have an HI queen, those of you who bought from the queen program and have an HI queen in there, if you have one of her daughters and she is amazingly docile, please let me know. But I think I'll be able to find a breeder. So the next question to the panel is, what makes a good queen? So, right, hopefully we all have queens in our hives. One of the things that we check all the time is to make sure it's queen, right? You make sure your eggs and larvae. So how do you know if the queen is good?
There's lots of brood, and they're gentle. And some are more industrious than others, and they're making honey.
So lots of brood, gentle, and making lots of honey. So that's what Carol wants to see. Ed, how do you know if the queens are good?
Okay, I have a hierarchy of qualities that I look for. Hygiene is one, priority one. Second is gentleness, or lack of defensiveness. I have to be able to work the hives. If I can't work the hives, I don't want the hive. I'm a shorts and t-shirt kind of guy. So I take stings, I'm not gonna lie. But if I can't work them in shorts and t-shirts, I don't want the bees. And I have zero issues with replacing queens because of that. So I got hygiene, workability. Lower on my list, which is controversial or whatever, is honey production. I don't care about honey production. I'm not looking to make money on the bees. I'm trying to have bees that can live and sustain in my apiary without 100% care and maintenance from me. Do I check them all the time? I do. My program is harder than just treating and going about your day. So, but hygiene, lack of defensiveness, and then honey production is my hierarchy or criteria.
Forgot one. That I know is important to you. No, it's kind of shallow.
Oh, the color.
Yes.
Yeah. Well,
The
I
looks of the queen,
have
right?
I have a preference. If she looks pretty, she gets a little favor in my opinion.
She gets extra points if she's
Yeah.
attractive.
She does.
Okay, so, and what that is, it's sort of, up to you, right? I mean, some people like the golden queen, some people like the darker queens, the tiger stripe queens. There are all different kinds of queens out there that have different kinds of appearances to them. And surely we all have like our favorites. So what makes a good queen for me? I like queens that survive 2 winters or 3 winters, that their colonies are able to survive. Now, granted, I treat them more than probably Ed treats them. I don't know about Carol's treatment regimen, so I'm not really looking for that colony to survive on its own. I mean, it's surviving with some mite care on my part, but I like colonies that stay in the box and don't swarm, and that I know that queen has been around. So they're colonies that I like to graft from. So surviving is one, because I don't want to be, sort of dealing with loss every winter. And the other is gentleness. I have my especially in my home yard, I can't have bees chasing my kids around, or more so my wife around. That would be the end of my beekeeping, maybe the end of me, if my family was being chased around, or the people that buy honey at the honey stand. I actually heard that some people are afraid to come to the honey stand because there are too many bees around. I said, I thought that makes it more authentic, like if the bees are flying around, you assume that the honey's from those bees, but gentleness is one for me. And there's definitely different honey production, right? So there's definitely that Robin Underwood presented that at the somewhere recently. I forget where I heard it, but she was talking about the program where they had a whole bunch of different queens that were either local queens or California queens and Georgia queens. And they had a large sample. I think they had 30 in each group or 40 in each group, and they gave them to like experienced beekeepers. Like Jeff Eckel was one, our inspector, who had these queens, and they asked them about a bunch of different outcomes, and one of them was honey production. And it was remarkable how much the local queens outperformed the Georgia and the California queens in regards to honey production. I mean, these were hives that were making 100+ pounds of honey versus 40 pounds of honey, and they were blinded. So the beekeepers were blinded to where those queens came from. But they were all it was funny because they were all marked in different colors. So one line of queens were marked green, the other were red, the other yellow, and the word got around the green queens were the best. So it's funny how bias gets in there, right? As far as what people think, so the word got out amongst the beekeepers that the green queens are the best. So everybody, I think, favored their green queens, and the green queens, I think, were from Pennsylvania or Indiana or something like that. But the moral to the story of that story was that local queens are going to perform better, at least in regards to honey production. Now, is that because they're more familiar with the area, or somehow they're imprinted in their genes to where to forage? I don't know. Why does a colony led from a Pennsylvania queen collect more honey than a colony led by a California queen? I don't know.
Indiana was first.
Yeah.
And Pennsylvania second.
Right. And California was third, and Georgia was fourth. And it wasn't. You looked at the data, and granted, it wasn't published data. It was pre-published data, so it hadn't gone through peer review yet, which is sometimes the step that kills a lot of this kind of findings, fortunately or unfortunately, depends on what side you're sitting on. But it was remarkably different. How the honey production from Indiana and Pennsylvania queens clearly outperformed it, yeah. So why do you think a Pennsylvania queen collects more honey than a Georgia queen?
I would imagine that they're familiar with the foraging.
Could be. And that could be learned. I don't know, somehow. What do you think, Carla?
That Georgia water longer, so they go slow, eventually get the frontage, but the northern bees, they only have a certain life span of collection cost. I don't.
So I think that you have to decide as a beekeeper what you want in your bees, right? Because the queen pretty much determines that largely to what kind of characteristics you have in your colony. And if your colony is doing what you like it to be doing, then keep your queen. If your colony is not doing what you like it to do, you should reconsider queening. Now, it's not always the queen's problem, right? So I did this with my apprentices. The hive cannot be producing well because of other reasons than the queen, right? So give me a few. This is when the audience participates and not keep.
I could have one of the diseases in the book.
Drifting, right? So drifting. The population is down in that hive because for some reason the bees are returning to the hive on the left or the hive on the right, whether or not it's hive prediction on the hive position on the stand, prevailing winds, pheromone related. I don't know why, but one hive is definitely attracting the foragers when they come back. So that hive is going to be more productive than the hive next to it. How can you test that theory? I don't know, switch the hives around and see whether or not that improves the production of that hive. But drifting's one. Others, I heard disease, right? So is the hive disease? Healthy, forage is only going to be as good as the health of the forager, right? So if your forager is struggling with some sort of viral infection or other infection, it may not forage as well. So one thing to consider is that, right? What else? Hive beetles, right? So is the hive just sort of on its decline and the hive beetles have moved in? I promise that I'm not going to talk about hive beetles today. So that's all I have to say, John. Any other reasons? Come on, guys. Oh, Keith knows it all. Somebody besides Keith. Come on.
Poor forage.
Poor forage, right? Nutrition. So if you want to wake up in the morning, what do they say? Have breakfast, right? If you want to be productive, eat your breakfast, right? So if you go into your hive and the pollen stores and the nectar stores are inadequate, then they're not going to have the energy to forage.
The color of your hive, how they're painted.
How's that going to affect productivity? Drift.
Yeah.
Drift. I have a theory that I've shared with a few. I don't know if I'm ready. It's ready for prime time yet. So that's
Is that the blue light thing?
yeah, thanks. The
Oh,
blue
okay.
light thing. I think bees exposed to blue light work harder, but that's neither here nor there today. So stay tuned for that one.
Yeah. Still doing data research.
What?
Those that-
I'm exposing them to blue light to like sort of a blue plexiglass inner cover that light comes through it. So I got this theory that blue light makes them work harder, but it makes them lay more.
That's not a queen thing.
It's not a queen thing. I don't know what it is. Okay, well, stop laughing back there. I hear you snickering back there. Yes, Howard.
So if you have a queen you really like,
Right.
should you replace all the queens in the apiary with her
Well,
offspring?
we're going to talk about that in a second.
I'm trying to get you to talk about what.
Well, I'm talking about a failing hive, I know I'm boring people and it's awfully simple, but we have to remember that most of us are simple people in this audience. So I'm talking about if your hive's failing, before you blame it on the queen, what other factors should you consider? Because I see it all the time. Oh, my queen's not good. You have no idea if your queen's not good or not if you don't consider all these other factors. One of the things that people look at is laying pattern this time of year. It's dangerous. I always put fresh foundation in my hives this time of year. And part of the reason why I'm doing that is I want to see the queen lay on new foundation this time of year before I make an assessment if she's failing or not. So if you look at some of the old comb, they're all jacked up and they have drone comb in there and regular comb and pollen and you look at that frame and you say, well, it doesn't have a good laying pattern on it. It means nothing, honestly. You know, unless you put a fresh foundation there that the bees draw the comb and the queen lays on it, and you look at how the eggs and young larvae look, don't say your queen is laying poorly just because you see cap brood on a frame that looks spotty. That's dangerous. I mean, it's not dangerous. You can go ahead and do it, but you may be making an assumption that's totally wrong.
Yeah, laying pattern isn't the sheet that you're looking for, because and anytime that she's laying and there's a cell or two or three that has honey in it, or nectar, she passes it and keeps on trucking. Well, now those couple of cells are off that cycle. She won't hit them again until they clean that out, and that she may not come back to that. So when you're looking for a laying pattern, you look at every available cell was laid out. If she lays out a group here, and within that group, if it's wide open and there's missing stuff, that's a poor laying pattern. But if a whole frame there's 3,000 cells on one side of a frame. Typically about 1,200 is consumed by the honey. So she got roughly 2,000 cells she could lay in. If only 1,000 of them are open and she laid 1,000 eggs, that is beautiful. But if there's 1,000 open and she laid 500 eggs, you know, you'll see her. She'll be laying on the next frame where she missed 500 cells in that frame. It's not so much the specific numbers I'm saying, but that means that she was not thorough. She's either running out or she's not paying attention, blah, blah, blah. But when you're looking for a laying pattern, don't pull your frame out like this here and go, oh, there's holes in it. Those holes were filled with something at one time that she passed over. And until that frame goes completely empty, which is come July, August, she's going to slow down. They're going to pull the honey out. Come September, when she starts laying again, you'll see those full sheets of brood coming back. But again, don't automatically look at a frame of brood and say there's a lot of holes involved in her laying pattern. If she laid every available cell, that's a good laying pattern and a good queen.
Yes, Paul. Hey, why did I look at you and say Paul?
Okay, I'm in.
Yes, Ed.
It could be a space issue.
Space issue?
For example, if you only have one super over there, they fill that up. You've got that space to lay eggs.
Sure. Right.
You harvest it, and you put it in the space.
Right, because you know they're used to living in a small space, right? So they're living in the wild. They're only in a 40-liter cavity, which is the 10 frame deep. So you know we sort of artificially make them very big for our own honey production. So right, and they'll fill out whatever space you give them. So if you want to make a lot of honey, when the honey flow is on, give them a lot of space, right? But eventually they will fill that space, and you may assume she's not laying much. But it may be because you're honey bound and they have filled every inch and cranny with nectar and honey, and therefore there's not much space to lay. So, right, you have to think about the size of your house before you make an assessment of how well she's laying. I had one other thought about why a queen may not be laying well. The wrong population of bees, right? So you make up a nuke, and you have no idea what you're making when you make up a nuke. And you end up with, you know, not enough young bees in that nuke, for whatever reason. And then you end up putting a new queen in that nuke. And you want to see, I'm going to check it in a week or two to see how that queen is laying. And you go back in and she's laid this much, you know, and that just could be because you have not enough young bees in that, not enough nurse bees. Now, granted, older bees can revert back to nurse bees and take on some of that function, but you're not going to get, you know, a frame or two of filled out brood if you don't have the right balance of
And
bees
when you
in there.
make a new cup.
Hold on, Carol, you need the mic.
And when you make a new cup, the old bees go back.
Sure.
So, you know, you only have those nurse bees. And I found that if there's not enough in there, the queen's not laying. And you're thinking, I put a nice mated queen in here, why isn't she laying? Not enough bees.
Yeah, or too much space to bee ratio is the other thing that you have to think about. You know, if you're sort of starting up a new hive and you have a new queen and you have bees that are covering 3 frames and you put it in a 10 frame box, you're going to come back in a week or two and the queen's only going to lay so much. If you put that 3 frames of bees in a nuke box and come back in a week or two, that queen is going to be laying on a full frame or two at that point. So you have to think about that too before you make an assessment that the queen's not laying well. So what can you do? So you go to a hive this time of year and you're trying to make an assessment, you know, this queen overwintered, she's approaching a year, 18 months. She doesn't look like she's laying well. How am I going to decide? One is you're going to keep notes, right? You're going to keep your notes because you're not going to make an assessment off a one-time assessment generally. So if you're going to try to make an assessment on if your queen's gentle, if your queen is thriving, you should have notes that you can look back at and make an assessment of that to see if it's consistent over time. Okay. What else can you do? You can decide, you can put a frame of emerging brood in there. You know, you can put a frame that, you know, the queen lays in circles. You could put a frame where the calf brood looks a little bit older and some of the brood in the center of the frame is starting to emerge, and you can tell over the next day or two the rest of the brood is going to emerge. Stick that frame in that hive and see if that helps. Give the bees a little bit of food. Find an open frame of nectar somewhere, put it right next to the brood nest and see if that helps. And then come back in a week or two and see whether or not that queen is laying better before you make a decision that the queen is not good. Who presented? Dave Tarpey presented this at somewhere that I heard recently, where he says this mistake is made all the time, where people say a queen's failing and they end up taking that queen and putting it into a different hive, and all of a sudden the queen is thriving again. So it may be something is off with your hive more so. I would say more than likely something is off with your hive and something is off with the queen for the most part. You know, just the chance of that being true is probably higher. And that was I'm not stopping. So
We'll cut the mic there.
I can talk loudly. Okay, I've been given 3 minutes.
No, you've been given 1 minute, because you were given 3 minutes.
I ignored it. Okay, so let's just do this really quick. This is a nuke box, right? It's really easy to convert a nuke box into something that makes queens, right? So you basically take your nuke box and you put a 3/4 inch shim on the bottom of it, and then you put a solid bottom on the bottom of that. Why do you put a shim on the bottom of the nuke box? Because oftentimes if the hive is making queen cells or swarm cells, they hang down at the bottom, right? So if you just put a solid bottom on this, they'll crush the queen cells at the bottom of the frame. So you want a little bit of a shim to hold some extra space. We put solids on these. We drill little holes on either side. So there's a little hole on this side and there's a little hole on the other side. And in the middle, there's a divider board that divides them in half. So basically you've taken a nuke box, right, and created it into 2 sort of mating chambers for the queen. So each side holds 2 frames. There's an entrance on both sides. And this is how we're making queens. It's sort of like you hear these things called queen castles. Well, this is a half a queen castle. Queen castles are generally 4 chambers or 3 chambers. This is a 2-chamber queen castle. Why do you have this? Because you're going to have your favorite hive make swarm cells or make cells sometimes. And it's good to have a box just to take that frame instead of cutting them, just throw them in there. And then basically in 3 weeks, you'll come back and you'll have a new young queen laying in there. Whether or not you ever use her or not, well, that's kind of up to you, but it's going to solve a lot of the issues that people have right now where they don't have queens and they're calling me in a panic about no queens. I'm looking right at somebody who knows who I'm looking at. So you don't want to be in that position. So if you get a new box, and you keep these colonies small and you always have a young queen and a few bees in here, it's great. So when you have a colony you like, this is one way to do it. The other way to do it is this thing called the double screen board. It's another way to basically easily take a colony and have that colony make a new queen. You have your favorite colony that's doing well. You're thinking, I like this colony, I like this queen, I want to make new queens from her. Basically, you put this on the colony, move some brood above without the queen, and now they're queenless up here, and the bees, through an emergency response, will make a new queen cell. She'll go out and mate. You have a new colony up here. There's plenty of YouTube videos about the use of a double screen board. It's become one of my favorite tools in the apiary to sort of especially this time of year when I'm thinking about, do I want to make some overwinter nukes? Do I want to just have an extra spare colony around? It's really simple tool to use. So you don't need much to assure yourself that you always have good queens. You basically need a nuke box and a double screen board, and you can go on from there. Any last minute thoughts about queens, Carol? Sorry about putting you on the spot, but Carol's not as good as me.
I bought some of these from you years ago and I use them.
These,
Yes, in the spring, I find form cells, they go into things.
that was many, many years ago.
Not even one for 10 years. I don't have it.
It's all relative.
Yes, so these things are great, and you can make them yourself. They're not hard to make. All you need is a shim. You can come up. I'll leave this up here. If afterward you want to come up and look at the size of the hole or the whatever, feel free. They're simple to make. Anyone can make this, and it's a great resource. And I'm getting pulled off the thing. I'm not done yet. If you're interested in becoming a queen raiser, right? I didn't talk about queen raising today. I'm a queen raiser. Ed's a queen raiser. There's other people in the club who may be queen raisers too. Again, he talked about ways to make money and ways to be valuable and needed. Queen raising is one of them. There's plenty of need for queens. So if you're interested in pursuing that, please let either Ed and I know, and we can kind of train you up to do that. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, George.
Everyone should thank Russ for being president, by the way. No, I'm not done yet. Sorry. I was president a year ago. I'm thankfully not president anymore. I miss being that. It's a great job. But now that I'm post-president, you realize how much work there is to be president, and the fact that Russ has taken this on and doing all this work, it's incredible. So I thank Russ, and all you should thank Russ too for the job he's doing this year. That's all. I'm off.
And George, did you ask if we have any
So we're
questions?
gonna do the giveaways, door prizes. That way some people want to leave, you can, and then after we give away the door prizes and eat more food that was brought here by Pat this morning, I drove up and he was sleeping in that chair, very chair. Drove up and scared it, so Pat, greatly appreciate you taking care of that every month. So we're gonna do the giveaways and then get that done, and then if we want to continue some more discussions, Mark wants to talk about.
I want to Mike,
Not actually,
I'll be George for a second. So the Helicopter Museum Family Day was a week ago Saturday, and I grabbed my observation hive, had it all set up. You know, it was gorgeous. Went out there. I didn't sleep well the night before. Got it set. Took it on out, and talked to about 400 people in 5 hours. The place was packed. Talking to everyone from 2-year-olds going, bees, to grandparents going, bees? Yep, same thing. It was wonderful. Got home, put the hive body back in place, took the observation part off, put the medians back on, and I forgot to do one thing. Open the freaking door. And I went back to inspect a week later, and I had a hive of dead bees. There were probably 25 bees that were still alive. I killed the hive because I forgot to open the door. You know, so what's the lesson there? If you're really tired, slow down. Think. Maybe you have a checklist. Put a big sign on the apiary that says, did you open the hive back up? Am I going to do it again? Probably not. I feel so guilty about this. It's just horrifying. So if you're going to do your observation hives or you're moving things around and you're hot and you're tired, you've been doing it all day, take a breath, get a big drink of water, and check to make sure that you didn't do something stupid like that. So there's the cautionary tale.
thank you for manning up to that. I might have kept that secret, not told anyone. Thanks for everybody that joined.